Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1096th New Social Environment. I'm Madison, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Julie Carr, Tim Roberts, Edwin Torres, and Cole Swensen. And now I'll introduce today's guests and host. Julie Carr's most recent books are Underscore, Mud, Blood, and Ghosts, Populism, Eugenics, and Spiritualism in the American West, Real Life and Installation, Climate, co-written with Lisa Olstein, and the essay collection Someone Shot My Book. Carr is a professor at the University of Colorado in Boulder in English and Creative Writing and is chair of the Women and Gender Studies Department. With Tim Roberts, she's the co-founder of Counterpath Press, Counterpath Gallery, and Counterpath Community Garden in Denver. Tim Roberts is the author of Drizzle Pocket and the Reaganites and is a longtime university press editor. In 2006, with Julie Carr, he founded Counterpath, which has published over 100 titles, hosted over 400 events and performances, and distributed over $2 million of food at the Counterpath Food Bank, which started in 2019. His current project is an offshoot and imprint of Counterpath MP, which enacts institutional critique via an effort to initiate new scholarly presses and by publishing university critical projects. Edwin Torres's poetry collections include Quanundrum, I Will Be Your Many-Angled Thing, Zoetiox, The Infinite Word Object, Ameriscopia, and editor of The Body and Language, an anthology from Counterpath Press. Fellowships include 2024 NISCA Individual Artist Commission, Arts Mid-Hudson, and the Foundation for Contemporary Arts. He's an adjunct poetry professor at Columbia University and is currently living in Beacon, New York. And our host, Cole Swensen, is the author of 20 volumes of poetry, most recently And, which was longlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize, and a collection of critical essays, Noise That Stays Noise. A former Guggenheim Fellow, she's been awarded the Iowa Poetry Prize, the SF State Poetry Center Book Award, and the National Poetry Series. She has also translated over 20 volumes of poetry, prose, and art criticism from French and won the 2004 PEN USA Award in Literary Translation. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Cole. Thank you so much.
And thank you. And thank you all for being here. Thank everyone for coming. We're really excited to be hearing about all of these great projects and this great example of the way that poetry overflows into really important community service and community engagement. So I just want to briefly say that this series is devoted to people who are often themselves poets and give up a lot of their valuable time to getting poetry out into the world, which means they're kind of sacrificing time that they could be using for their own work. So we're really wanting to celebrate them. So we always start with readings just to get poetry in the air. So we're going to start with a reading by Julie Carr. So take it away. And then we're going to segue into a reading by Edwin Torres, just sort of smoothly. So.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Thanks, Cole and Madison and all of Brooklyn Rail for having us today. And it's nice to see some friends and some family in the audience. So I'm going to we're all reading just 5 minutes or less, in my case, a little less. And I picked things to read that all either kind of take place in or reference Counterpath, the space and the garden, and also that or that might mention some of the people who are involved in our community there. So that's how I selected what to read. I'm reading four things. The first three are from a manuscript called The Guide, and the last one is from my new book, Underscore. And just so you know, The Guide plays with and references and quotes from Moses Maimonides, the Guide of the Perplexed. So you'll hear a little bit of medieval Jewish philosophy thrown in there. So here we go. Number 1. All the great evils which men cause to each other because of certain intentions, desires, opinions, or religious principles originate in ignorance, which is the absence of wisdom. I found myself thinking, having encountered these words in an abandoned, rain-soaked guidebook. Do you want the good news? Asked Ted from the other side of the fence, or the good news? I'll take the good news, I answered, while dropping peas into holes in the dirt. I knew snow was coming, that it was too early to seed peas, but I did not care. Prophecy was an emanation sent forth by the divine being through the medium of the mind, and nevertheless, firmly I pressed, soil to soil. The evil one, said Ted, the evil fuck, he emphasized, is going to jail. A spring cloud dashed over to cover the sun. The imagination, said the book, wins out over all other activities of mind. I tried to make a wind chime, but the wind did not blow. 2. Ludi hugs me in the parking lot. Golden grasses surround. We face each other as if on a windy plain. The hems of our skirts whip our calves. I want everyone to be married to someone, I say, so that no one will ever be alone. Ludi's husband died in a crossing. He was trying to return to her. That was 8 years ago. Now that Wayne has also died in a different kind of crossing, she cannot stop crying. I hold her against me and she holds me against her. We hold each other against each other and for each other. The hems of our skirts whip our calves. A single car passes. 3. It's a runaway universe. But they want their shoes, they want their hairspray, they want their golden nails, they want their sunscreen, they want their visors, they want their wireless buds. They want their candles, they want their guitars, they want their holiday wreaths. They want their street signs, they want their strap-ons, they want their solar flares. John comes in for avocado. Brenda stands behind the bread. Ludi's boy hands out numbers. Bagels go in a box. We need to amend. We need to trade. We need to build a bed. Who told you you had the right to a long life? Who told you your children did? We told you. We told ourselves. I could have cut the seed potatoes smaller and thereby would have had more potatoes to give away. And this last one is as from Underscore, and it's called Friday Day, Friday Night, and it also takes place at Counterpath. Days Garamond 10 in the eugenic stride of pissed off job lines and anti-home ec handouts. Skies so hard blue, it's unbalanced, forcing the earth like a bitch in the park's pathways, chained to her human's hand. Platinum plaited cruddier dolls fall forward toward the torn edge of a box. We've got underwear in a stroller and tomato stalks stalled in the dirt. Come on. Rick's giving letterpressed vote signs away, and Blair's rad aiders are out with their alt cop flyer for free. Nights ashy and hopeful and deep. We go there. Our faces flash, rushed with new blood. That's it. Thank you. Handing it over to Edwin.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Cole, and everybody for inviting me, being part of this. This will be short. I have a short piece, and then I have excerpts of a longer piece afterwards from a new manuscript. So I'll just start. Construction site. So many shiny surfaces. I don't know which are real and which are air. New architecture has that new photon smell. Everyone moving so fast, charging the light inside it, trying to wear it in, like making wrinkles in time. How I've learned to love my face, the surfaces I leave for new ones. Ekphrastic I. These are excerpts. Both beavers and cicadas connect to the porosity of a charged entanglement. The vibration of their presence remains long after displacements of surface viscosity. They are, in their own way, alchemical insurrectionists, air and soil for cicada, soil and water for beaver. As mercurial microbes get resifted for environmental transformation, both species achieve a continually recharged fertility by approaching what they leave behind as alignments of porosity. There's a connection here to poetry's environmental insurrection of process as a charged in alignment. Whatever is there, affected by you, is what you live through. What places you is what you choose to displace, according to where the words take you. It is a seismic narrative to palimpsest the narrative while suspending the narrative. I am connected to mysterious marvels of brain to hand, of blood to lung, of obviously fractured air. Walking into the cicadas, walking into the greater than, cicada land, the larger brood surrounding man, resurfacing perception by recovering sound. Let me step into vibration, my porous narrative, my seismic narrative, what I do in my writing to cover a surface by motivating a surface, a constantly perceived surface. I am a recovering, finding new surfaces of brain to land. The action of borrowing, lowercase o to lowercase u, to burrow beneath what I borrow. I am the layer placed over myself, using the alphabet I was given. I come from the larger than. No size am I, no action to I, lowercase I. The uppercase belongs to us all, the lower to me. The action of burrowing as being, the newly charged I, seismic borrower of underground stories, of obviously fractured broods, surrounding obviously fractured I. Earth turner earthworm, air turner cicada, water turner beaver, my totems of understanding have activated how I borrow where I belong. Word turner poet, how we species into understanding to find where we belong. It took this long in my writing to arrive here, my totems of arrive here. It took that long in my being to narrative my sound, to narrate my sound. Feathered serpent, heart of sky, what does pushback do to inner calm? What cliff to claim? Chromic integer, how quick does your entropic rosary frame familiarity with survival? What I wish for self is to see what self allows. The year I became explicitly intimate as the neck I stroked, a thread appears, as a sheet of glass, against the shards I seek. My own oblivion gorgeous by those before me. Abyss enters the conversation. Who is unreal to the pain they feel, the unknown hold of their inner psalm? Who am I to dare unreal, the world unreal? Lost my step. Go ahead. Abyss was talking. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. That just, I think, got us launched in a great direction. So Counterpath does so much in so many different directions that it's hard to, know where to start. And we want to go in all those directions in the coming conversation. But I'd love to start by hearing how you came up with the name Counterpath.
Maybe I'll jump in on that, Julie. And this will be a thing where I guess Julie and I are deciding who's going to answer what question, or struggling over that maybe. But Yeah, and thank you, just to kick things off, thank you so much for opening this space and opening this kind of conversational space to do this, and then having the idea to frame it with these with the readings, which puts everything in such a great light. So yeah, thank you to all and the Brooklyn Rail and everything. The name Counterpath was I have done a lot of work for Stanford University Press, and way back in 2004 was really excited to do the kind of production editing for the book Counterpath by Jacques Derrida and Catherine Malabou. It's a kind of a conversation between those two people, kind of multimodal in a lot of ways. There are a number of postcards that they were sending between each other that are included in there. And it always struck me as a fantastic book name, and it just kind of held this place. And then when we kind of crossed over into talking about starting a press, just to publish books, nothing to do with really performance spaces or anything like that, it kind of immediately came to mind. And so we went with it. I think it resonated with Julie as well. And then it's got a really wonderfully interesting kind of backstory in that it's really a translation of the French edition of the book, Contre Allée, which is the side street that kind of runs along the main boulevards in Paris specifically. And I think that these are also kind of side streets that sort of survived the Haussmann and the kind of obliteration, I think, of much of the city for certain types of redesign. So there's that to the whole thing too. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just standing up, if you wondered, to look to see if I could find the book on our shelves, but I didn't see it. Anyway, yeah, all that. And also, I think the fact that the original book that we were sort of leaping off of was a collaboration was important too, because our project was also going to be a collaboration. And just one thing about those side streets, that idea of the sort of the contre-allée is that I remember talking about this, Tim, I don't know if you remember this, but at that time, which was 2006, when we sort of launched the idea, there was a lot of talk, at least around us in the Bay Area, about sort of mainstream poetry versus, experimental poetry or not mainstream poetry. And I think one of the things we were talking about was that in a sense, you can't just kind of go against the mainstream. You have to deal with it, whatever it is. And so something about the side streets that kind of go along, they're doing their own thing, and they're other, but they are not, they're contending with the avenue, with the main street. So there was something about that too that we were thinking about.
Right. I love the notion of survival streets that survived. That idea too of things that carry on through great change, and Haussmannianism is a great metaphor for upheaval and change. So those things that survive. Do you want to go through the PowerPoint and just talk us through the various images?
Sure. So Madison can, yeah, okay. That's
Tell us about the free book.
a free bookstore.
There's some
Tim,
free books there.
you want to tell the story of the free bookstore?
Yeah, it's working out great. It's I'm at Counterpath right now here. I'm gonna see it's in that. Oh, I think that I'm a little blurred on the background, but it's right over there. And we're our original space was closer to downtown Denver, and there we started a bookstore really for small and independent presses only. So we would typically get on consignment, and I won't make this story go too long, but all the books from a certain small press, and so the shelves, and in fact the wood of the shelves that you see in this free books picture is from that old space. We kind of repurposed all those bookshelves. So they used to be full of, maybe we had maybe 15 or 20 or 25 presses, and small presses from around the country, and really books that you wouldn't find in other places. And then we would feature those presses at Counterpath, and on and on and on, so much activity. And then when we moved over to this current spot, which is in another part of Denver, we kind of brought that model with us, but kind of moved away from just featuring small presses to sort of a little bit more curated title by title idea. And then we did that for a little while. And then in 2019, we kind of made this turn of kind of more toward a community focus, and got involved with a neighborhood association over here. Yeah, thanks for switching to this image of the food bank. And that started, and it used to actually be on these shelves, just a couple little shelves that we had, and it would take place right in the bookstore.
The bank originally was much smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, it was much smaller. So what you're seeing here is the full kind of performance space, but the food we just used to do in the bookstore. And then when folks would come in to access the food, almost this was weekly, every week, people would look at the bookshelves and assume that those were available for the taking also. And I'd be sitting there, and I'd have to be like, no, that you have to pay for. And it was so incredibly awkward that we either had to move the food bank out of there, or start to give the books away. And actually they were expensive books. So we turned the corner and just said, hey, the food bank was a kind of community-based operation where we were getting donations from all around the neighborhood and just kind of recirculating the food. So at that point, we kind of took the sort of little free library idea and made that entire room into the kind of a free book donation-based bookstore. So all of those books are really from the neighborhood and the local area, and are just kind of circulating around. And it's been fantastic. It's a much easier kind of financially and all around. And yeah, so that's really what you're seeing with that. And the food bank then moved and expanded out into the main space on Fridays. And it has become a thing that has drawn more people, I think, to Counterpath over the years than any of the publications or readings or events that we've had. It has been it's been a crowd of people consistently every week with something that we're just sort of, there's a kind of hand-to-hand, face-to-face interaction that it has been off the charts, just extraordinary, and impacted pretty much everything that we do. Here, this image is just of a neighborhood association meeting. So we got involved with them a little bit, and then quickly kind of volunteered the space and become a home base for this organization, which meets monthly, and I'm kind of deeply involved with them. And it's a neighborhood which is why we started the food bank in the first place. It's probably up in the close to 40% poverty range in the neighborhood. And to be involved with the neighborhood association is to confront that, and how to strategize to help people, first of all, but also to larger and larger scale to confront those kinds of dynamics. And that's been going on for quite a while. Yeah, on and on. This is not a Counterpath crowd, I gotta say, just to be honest.
I wish it were, though. Yeah.
We'd like to
We've had
dance.
dance parties, but not quite this big is all there is to say. But yeah, this is the this is the City Park Jazz Festival that happens in Denver every summer. And there was a year, 2016, when we had a booth at the City Park Jazz Festival. We were invited to have a booth, and I think they had no idea who we were or what we did. But we set up a booth and decided to make each Sunday be some sort of form of kind of installation or performance. My favorite one that I remember was, we don't have a picture of this, but was that the booth and everything in it was red. So we were selling, I guess, for like 5 cents or 10 cents, as many red objects as we could collect of every single kind of possible object. And there was another time when I guess C.A. Conrad was there and did some kind of
Yeah.
performance. I can't quite remember. And then another one where Summer Browning, the poet Summer Browning, set up a joke booth. So
Well, this
that
might
was
be,
one of the things we've done.
yeah, this could be a really good moment to share my screen if we can. Because the thing that you just mentioned, I know exactly where the video of that is.
Maybe we should see if Cole has another question first.
Yeah.
No, let's go right into that. That sounds great.
Okay, let me give this a try. So we're gonna head over to the Counterpath website really quickly here. And if somebody could give me a thumbs up that you can see this. Okay, great. And then you can see this is an anthology that we're getting ready to come out with, co-published with MIT Press, with Nick Montfort and Lillian Bertram, Yvonne Bertram, editor. And I see Nick on the call. Hi, Nick. So we're just going to look at City Park Jazz here. And this was a thing that became a really wonderful kind of expanded book experience that I think we started to really look at when we opened a space in 2010. We purely published books from 2006 to 2010, ended up with this small storefront in Denver, and then started thinking about gallery shows, film screenings, the bookstore, all of this other sort of on-the-ground engagement. We lost that space. We were essentially, kind of priced out over there. And in that time frame, we sort of went mobile and ended up collaborating with the City Park Jazz people, which was a wonderful thing to happen because we were then able to kind of take Counterpath to where the people were in a lot of ways. Instead of saying, hey, come here, come here, come here all the time, we kind of went there. And
Yeah, it was like having a pop-up space for a summer, basically.
Yeah, it was, pop-up space. And here's the main page for the whole thing. So each week through the summer, we had the sort of jazz band on stage. We had an event at the Counterpath tent, and then we published a book alongside. Every single week we published a new chapbook, and Rob Fitterman, we're really grateful. He actually recommended a lot of the authors who appeared in that. But the first week was a book by Rob, and we did this sort of consignment shop that Julie just mentioned, and then
there's the red things.
Here's the red stuff, and Julie's got the red.
Loud.
So this goes on, and we. So that might give you a sense, and yeah. On and on with the City Park Jazz all the way through the summer. And it was a blast. It was really, really fun.
Maybe I'll just say one more thing about that, and then maybe we can see what other questions there are. But I think this thing about publishing a book every week, that this was Tim's idea, of course. But that idea of publishing a book every week, I think it got sort of translated into later projects of publishing, like we did or I should say Tim did a whole series of chapbooks of just Trump's tweets, and then the using electricity sequence, which was also at first I think there was a series of chapbooks. So there's just been different series that have been created rather quickly, and kind of produced as almost I don't know, a series, but kind of also a one-off in a certain way, like something quick and fast that you could do. Yeah, the Trump tweets books, I don't know if they still exist, but they were pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
they're all on Lulu, and this was yeah, that was fun too. And we had a bunch of people kind of working on this, and it was meant to be as fast as possible. And yeah,
Maybe it's time to recirculate those.
maybe it'll be Truth Social this time. We'll have to.
All right.
Mm. Do you want to show us any more of the videos that are on the website at this point? I was thinking about, in particular, the community garden, and to see how the community garden works in with the food bank. And I think it's fascinating that poetry has overflowed into these really concrete community building things.
Yeah, I'll talk about the garden because that's sort of my project, but I don't know if we have a video. I think we have photos. But
Just
I think really there's a lot to say about urban gardens. But one of the things I'll say is that there's nothing economic or in terms of time that's efficient or functional about a community garden. It's mostly experiential, I would say. We produce food, sometimes more, sometimes less, but where most of the food comes for the food bank is from donations from an organization called We Don't Waste, which drives around the city picking up excess food from all kinds of grocery stores, catering companies, you name it, and brings fresh food to us that way. That doesn't mean I don't sometimes like carry some cucumbers into the space and lay them down on the table, and people in fact do take them. Or I often will give we'll give food to volunteers who work in the food bank, or some of the volunteers who work in the food bank also work in the garden. But I think anyone who's a food gardener knows it's mostly about the experience. It's not really about the abundance. But it is a very meaningful experience, I think, for people who want to take part. And every summer, there's different people who participate, and sometimes, it's a lot of people, and sometimes it's very few. It depends on the year. One of the things that's been important to me, I guess, as the person who kind of launched it in a way, is that um, a lot of urban gardens, the way they work is that each person pays like $100 or something, and they get a plot. And so you're working, it's like parallel play. You're working with people, but everybody has their own plot. So you're kind of like eyeing each other's plots, like, how come that person's kale's doing so good and mine isn't, like, or whatever. But the way we do this is that everyone who works in the garden for any amount of time is is then invited to harvest any amount of food. So, you come once, or you come and walk through and, pick a single weed, that's it, you're part of it. You don't even have to really do anything. And so that way it's just as open as it can be within the sort of bounds of time and, and other constraints. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that at the moment.
Can I ask, where physically is the garden? Is it
Oh,
at, yeah.
yeah, it's at the space. The Counterpath is a big used to be originally it was a gas station. And yes, the soil has been tested, don't worry. Um, and then it was a repair garage. So it's a gas station from what, the 50s, Tim, or the 60s originally?
Yeah, in the early 50s.
Yeah. We have a neighbor who remembers, who lives across the street, who remembers when it was a gas station. So it was a gas station, then it was a repair garage, and then it was like a small manufacturing factory of soccer goals. Or it was probably something else in between there. So I don't know, Tim, if you have any pictures of what it looked like when we first got it, that would be kind of amazing to see. But
Um,
we did a huge amount of work, and I should not say I did not do this work, to transform it into what it is now. And there was always this kind of big open area, to the right, that when we first got there was just weeds to your chin. And that is what we transformed into the food garden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Do you want to maybe segue back to the PowerPoint or the slide images?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can jump back to the slides real quick.
It's our new location. There's a photo. I think you had a photo of the building in there. But yeah.
Yeah, there you can see the garden over there to the right.
Yeah.
Behind the fence.
Great. Yeah. And so the performance space is behind those X garage doors.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And the bookstore is in what would be like the office if you were going into a gas station. And that's to the right of the front door.
Right. Right. And do you, in the summer, open those big doors so that you can have a flow between inside and outside? Is that?
Yeah. And if you go back, and then that other photo had the doors open with people kind of spilling out. Yeah, exactly. So that's.
Yeah. Great. So we caught a glimpse of some performance that Edwin's performing. So maybe we should like segue in that direction. I know that we want to cover both the performance and maybe since we're on the image, we can ask Edwin to leap in and tell us about this, what looks like an amazing performance.
Oh, this was really fun. At Counterpath, Julie had an amazing project. Julie, it was called Resurrections, correct?
Well, the piece that you did was called that, but the overall project is real life and installation. Yeah.
So she asked writers and artists and filmmakers to interpret her text from that collection. And so I'm over here interpreting. I forgot, honestly, it was a feeling, but I was using the space and the fact that the light was only coming from the projector. So I don't want to explain. I want the viewer to kind of walk away with what it is, but I was integrating a certain I guess the mobility of air in that garage with a piece of vellum hanging down. The beautiful shadow plays, which Jeffrey Petherbridge caught fantastically with these photographs. And I'm in there sort of ripping apart the vellum with my dowel sticks, and there's an image projected on the vellum. So the all-encompassing, the overall sense is one of destruction and creation, which is what I got from Julie's text. And that's all I'll say about the actual piece, but the lighting worked beautifully. And then this maybe jumps into the anthology a little bit, although this piece was not from the anthology. But I had this idea for this book, and I had never put an anthology together before. So I didn't know, how do I get a press involved? Who do I contact? And I just was following Counterpath for such a long time. The earlier piece that I read today was about the sense of a world unreal and to dare the world as one being unreal. And that was my way of sort of situating my text within Counterpath, where I felt like, I think, as Julie referenced before, that the name Counterpath and the avenues that are sort of like put forth for the viewer connect to tendrils in poetry for me, to language. So I really appreciate the sense of the multiple directions into poetry that Counterpath was investigating. So I approached Tim, and Tim was very open and gave me a lot of freedom, and through his guidance to kind of like how a book should work and how to kind of place all these various inspirations of mine. I've been thinking about how the body's appearance and language would work through my various collaborations over the years. I didn't know if there was something there to kind of gather material from all these people that were very inspiring to me and people that I had not even met yet. So eventually, over time, I just gathered this assemblage together. And it was after I had the manuscript together that I approached Tim, and that usually it's the other way around. A press would give you a contract of some sort or a mission or a goal, and you work towards that. So Tim was very open to seeing the collection and guiding me through putting it together. Um, so so that's, we can talk a little more about the actual anthology itself, but that was the genesis of Counterpath's relationship to the anthology, was to kind of let me have free reign, but there was a definite guiding force to put all that together so that we have an object that could somewhat represent this huge topic of what the body's place is in language. So.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in to say also that performance and dance in particular has been really important to the space of Counterpath for years. Even when we were in the old space, the original space, we had dancers coming and performers, performance artists doing all kinds of work. And I mean, I used to be a dancer and have a connection with the dance world in the past. I had a very strong connection in the dance world in the past, less strong now, but still, Edwin as a performer and not just a writer, but really a performer, um, has also been, kind of part of that world, for as long as I've known you, Edwin, which is long. And so I think that for us to do this anthology made so much sense, not only because of our relationship with Edwin and our respect for Edwin's work and thought, but also because of our long relationship with performance and dance at the space and also as people.
And we had talked before about this, which is worth bringing up now, how the idea, in a way, is to sort of reframe performativity in language and performance in language, and how sometimes the word performance is fraught, is very heavy to kind of get through in poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a chance to kind of see like how, by including writers, healing practitioners, musicians, not people normally associated with writing, including all that work in one volume, to kind of see what does it mean to have the body's place in language. And yeah, Julie, very much, we were up in New York City years ago. We were doing performances like on Houston Street and all that stuff. So that undercurrent of familiarity is really vital, to have that chemistry, to kind of have that trust in each other, to see what happens with language when we add the word body or we add the word performance to it. And by now, this is what, 2019. So over the last few years, I think body is a little more accepted, if not, well, over the last like decade or so. But the idea of the body in poetry is not is not filled with so much dread. There's a little more acceptance to the voice of that.
Yeah, I guess that comes and goes. I wanted to make a shout out to the New York Improvisation Festival. This is,
Yeah.
I don't want to wax nostalgic too much because I know that can be annoying. But in, I don't know, 1992, I think, the dancer Sandra Loring and I initiated a 2-week long festival called the New York Improvisation Festival, which was primarily dance, but included poetry and theater and music. And the first poet that we invited to participate in the New York Improvisation Festival was Edwin Torres. So not only that, but the second maybe date that Tim and I had together was Tim showing up for literally every night of the New York Improvisation Festival for 2 weeks running. So that was our,
I knew
you
what was
know, that was how he wooed me. So I wanted to just shout out to that event because, and it's still going. I think it's now run by Movement Research. And I ran it with Sandra for like 7 years. But I wanted to shout out to that event because I think that event, which is grounded in performance, was kind of like the underscore, the earth underneath which Counterpath, sort of sprung out. I mean, there are other things too, of course, but that was one of the grounding, sort of extended events out of which we grew. I don't know if you think that's true, Tim, but I think that's true.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say about that. I mean, there's a whole way too that we came to Colorado in 2006, and we were like, Jesus, we'd much rather be in New York City. Um, we
No
kind of,
offense, Colorado, Denver, we love you,
yeah,
but
there's
yes.
a way, and yeah, no, I mean, we are built our lives here and raised our kids here. But there's also this thing of like, let's just create what was happening on the East Coast, whatever we weren't finding here, and just try to get it to happen and feel at home that way. So yeah, and all of that kind of taps into those roots of performance just being what really just was transcendent and really kind of sent things over the top, and was that kind of overflow, maybe you could say, experience. Yeah.
Well, there was the idea of parallel perspectives opening new entry points, which I think Counterpath really like champion and move forward with. I was wondering if you guys could speak a little bit about connecting your community outreach to the outreach in language and poetry and publishing, like because you've done a great job of showing how the garden and how the world has reflected in the space. Tim, how does that kind of like factor into actual publishing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question, and it's ongoing, and we're constantly discovering new ways that this is taking place. It's, I think that our community engagement has, one of the first things that happened was in the old location. We used to be right next door to a bus company that was running buses back and forth to the border with Mexico. So we would have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, the sidewalk in front of Counterpath would be full of folks who weren't speaking English, and who were just waiting to get on this bus to go down south. And for the longest time, we just kind of ignored that in so many incredible ways. And then, I mean, I don't speak Spanish, and it just occasionally people would kind of glance into Counterpath, but most of the time there wasn't. And then finally we got at least one artist who came over, who's a local photographer, and really completely engaged the bus company and did basically an entire show in the space, that included images and I think some videos and interviews with people who were doing that. The bus station has since closed and moved on. But that really was a head turner for me as far as, hold on a second. We're place-based. I think the publishing of the books and the AWP and the national focus, constant for book sales, meant that we were kind of on this meta level in a sense. But when we started doing the space, it became place-based, look around you, who are the people there? And then we made that connection. And then over here where we are, it became more and more, and then especially with Neighborhood Association, Food Bank and everything. And it became, I think now, and ongoing, is looking at displacement, involuntary displacement of folks, and gentrification issues, which art organizations, of course, are on the sort of leading edge of in so many instances. So we work on that through the Neighborhood Association, which has been kind of redirected in a lot of ways, specifically to combat those issues. And to unpack what all of that means. As many people know, it is epic, and has so many connections on so many levels, so that at this point, I think we're seeing folks come back around through the literary community who are working on and experiencing exactly these issues, and have in their families, and are writing about that and coming back with manuscripts. And a case in point here is Jose Villaron's Open Pit, which really is looking at displaced communities in Peru and the entire dynamic of what happened there and his own experience as a Californian. With
Maybe
a
you want to
child.
share, do you have an image from that we could share? That book is incredible, one of the recent books, and also I was able to teach that in a class, so that's another
Yeah,
connection.
I'm
But
going to go ahead and share this.
yeah, wanted
So,
to
you know,
people to know about it.
The better.
Things like that I think are happening more and more. And then, you know, it just goes on and on. But that's a really, really good example of something. And I think, Edwin, were you a part of the New York City launch for this? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. That
Exactly.
was
There it is
great.
right there. Jose's book page, and then the launch that we had in 2022 of both The Body and Language and Open
Yeah.
Pit, which I was sad to miss. But this was and you know, anthologies, it was so easy. I mean, it was to say yes to The Body and Language anthology. It was just like a snap. And so Edwin, it's all the credit goes to Edwin on this. You know, the way that anthologies are community builders. We just experience again and again going back to Lyric Postmodernisms, which was edited by Reginald Shepard, and that was one of the first books that we did. And we were just blown away by the response there and the way we were able to have readings in different places around the country and see these different communities happen around a particular book that really doesn't happen with a single author book. I mean, it can if you get a bunch of people to read with you, but there's something so magical about anthologies. And then Angels of the Americlips anthology of Latinx writing that we did with Carmen Jimenez Smith, and that behaved in the same ended up being the same thing. Another amazing piece of an amazing anthology, and we're really excited to have an anthology of computer-generated work coming out in about a month. Output, which I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and then also just about this anthology in particular, I'm trying to make it. I mean, I feel a connection between the topic of the body and language and the work that we're doing at Counterpath, which in a way is hard to theorize because it's so immediate. Like there's nothing more immediate than moving food from, one person to another, or really growing food. But those things, and I feel uncomfortable theorizing them, but I also feel like those things really are activities of the body, and they're activities for the body, and they are the body and language. I mean, they're a way that we communicate and connect with other people through the very simple thing of the most basic thing of all, which is to move food from one hand to another. And so to me, that's a very deep connection, really, between the kind of work that you do, Edwin, and that you support in this anthology, and the kind of work that we're doing in the space when we're not having art events.
Well, the generative quality of movement just kind of is a creative fulcrum. It kind of just builds upon itself, and it's important to champion that, and that's what Counterpath does. The connection between that and body and language, it's totally there.
Yeah.
Would you, that's such an amazing anthology, and I'd love to have you, Edwin, just describe it a little bit for people, the range in form, and I know also that you have some images that we want to see.
Oh, yes, yeah. I have put, yes.
Describe the incredible range and then show us the images.
Right. There's a short little video I put together of the art that's in the anthology, but before then, just real briefly, I had such a range of people contributing to the anthology. I wasn't quite sure how to formulate it. So I arranged them all alchemically. I kind of gave each essay one of four elements: fire, water, earth, or air. And it was my way of separating. Okay, so here's some incredible images from the artists involved. And this video is meant to kind of go one after the other to kind of just get a sense of the world to kind of occupy within what body language could be. So the anthology, I wanted to kind of formulate the anthology almost as a modular book of some sort, while being a properly produced book with a spine that you can hold in your hand. So each chapter is made of 4 elements, and you can choose to read all the water ones, all the air ones, all the fire ones. There's no specific order to that. It's more my collection of each one to sort of make each stanza a composite body of sorts. So that's my intellectual theory into how I formed it. It's more to kind of like guide you through what this subject matter could be. I feel there's so many aspects to it that kind of like, give and keep giving back. I did want to read a little section, just like a 1-minute little part from one of the contributors. And then from that point, Cole, you can go from there. This is from an Alexander Techniques teacher, Chloe Wing, who passed. And before she passed, she had all these journal notes that were interpreted or transcribed. So from that, this is the ending of her particular section. And I'll just read this. So Chloe Wing writes, "One of our favorite pastimes when my husband and I were young and had time to while away was soaking in bubbles in an old claw-footed bathtub in the kitchen of his walk-up apartment in Little Italy. With my finger, I used to trace entire stories on his back, letter by letter, and he would read them out loud to me as I traced. Sometimes he would edit them, correcting my grammar or spelling, and we would laugh, and it was all in all a delicious time. Years later, David was in an auto accident that left him comatose for a month. Much to our heart's delight, he recovered and has gone on to be a brilliant novelist and journalist. The other night, waiting in line for a movie, I remembered those bubble bath days and began to trace a message onto his back. After a few minutes of waiting for a response, I peeked around his shoulder at his face. He looked back at me and smiled and said, 'What?' The old ways of thinking about thinking were based on our ability to accumulate and regurgitate information, to quote unquote, get it right. We were assumed to do it the same way, and some of us were better at it than others, simply, quote unquote, more intelligent. The brain is a naturally creative learning machine. No motivation is necessary. Something in us aches to learn. From the time we were born, we do nothing but learn." So that's Chloe. And I love how the anthology has bits of wisdom like that, and then poems, and then images, and just sort of like sets the reader on their way for you to kind of inform your own body with what you need. So
thanks. That was great. And thank you so much for reading that piece. That's wonderful and gives us a sense of the tone and the generosity that for me really marks the whole anthology. I was thinking, as an editor, I think everybody's editing process for something like this is really different. But I was wondering, is there an overlap in a certain sense? An editing project like that is a kind of choreography, getting these different elements to move smoothly together. And your own work with movement is always engaging in choreography. Was there an overlap there for you, an echo?
I love that choreography. Yes, it was like the sense of the sequencing and the movements within pieces, within moments. Who follows who? There's some contributors that have 1 page. There's some that have 10. And excuse me, I remember speaking to friends as I was putting this together, feeling bad that I was leaving people out, and I said, no, don't worry about that. They'll be mad at you anyway. More likely, they were saying, just go with your instinct, go with the intuition of the overall piece. And I felt that in a way, just like when you're creating a poem, it speaks back at you. You sort of listen to it. You listen to the sequencing. You listen to the moments that you're creating between the pages, between the stanzas, even. Very much like creating a poem. The anthology sort of like led me in a way. And I felt that there was something really special in it without thinking too much about it, because then you get trapped in your own head. Um, Great to end on float. Fantastic. This is one of Chloe's drawings, actually, Chloe Wing, who I just read from. She would have these great 8.5 by 11 printouts of these three skeletons. And then at the end of a session, she would make a marker drawing on them. And here's your assignment. By next week, learn how to float, whatever that means, and so forth. Anyway, yeah, so I think that there's a definite choreography, there's a definite sense of how that works. And I remember Tim just also entrusting me and empowering that sense of freedom, but at the same time knowing that there was an engagement necessary throughout the whole process. And my introduction is just one page. I don't want to linger on too long as an editor. I want to just kind of like set you on your way. So it's a one-page introduction, and then we kind of flow into it, which is what I do in readings and performances. It's learning how to not get in your own way, which is a lifelong process. To just like, here, this is on you. You can take it or leave it, but it's on you. And I think the anthology does that to a sense. There's a sense of trust. And actually trust, okay, so trust is a good point, because when Julie and Tim were talking earlier about the genesis of Counterpath, I think that there's a trust that Counterpath has built in giving the reader or the audience their own intelligence, their own ability to kind of make choices. And that at a core is really important with the experimental nature of what they do, but also just the human nature, just like allow me to kind of have my own thoughts and to choose where to go. And that's a really vital aspect in the creative act, and Counterpath does that beautifully. So again, thank you, Tim and Julie. And so that.
And the thanks are all ours, because Edwin approached us as far as I understand, a sort of veritable kind of institution in himself of this incredible history of engagement and with performance and writing, and through so long, that it would have been so idiotic of us to not immediately take that anthology. And I'll just say too quickly, it landed right head to head with COVID, ironically enough, in the lockdown. So we've been trying to kind of, hey, check this anthology out ever since then. And it's just, again, overflow. It's off the charts. Every page spread, which Edwin spent time on in every moment of it, and did the typesetting and things. So yeah.
I think one of the things that frees Counterpath up to kind of do a lot of different things, and a lot of things that maybe aren't expected. We kind of have I guess a sort of philosophy of whatever we want, we'll try, we'll do, but also if we don't feel like doing something, we don't. So in order to have that, you kind of have to divorce yourself a bit from some idea of the market, and marketing, and a lot of sort of the pressure around publishing, and, all this stuff around whatever we consider to be success, can really get in the way for an artist, but it can also get in the way, I think, for a press or a space or any kind of venture that really wants to keep itself alive and changeable and unexpected and unpredictable. So I say that, and at the same time, there is always this desire to get these books into people's hands. So I'm glad we get to talk about this incredible book that we really do love and support and want people to read. So yeah, just wanted to point out
Great.
that kind of underlying ethos, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. And maybe that's a great thing on which to segue into questions, because I'm sure lots of people have questions or comments that they'd like to leap in and do. So I'll turn it back over to Madison, who will organize and orchestrate the Q&A.
Hi. First, before we jump into the Q&A, thank you, all four of you, for this discussion. It's been so great to see how far how far-reaching Counterpath's engagement with its community is. Um, as far as our Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that if you have a question for any of our guests, there's a link in the chat where you can submit your question for the Q&A session and we'll pass it along. But to kick it off, I have my own question, and your discussion really brought up the idea of hunger to me, specifically the story that I believe Tim was telling of when you guys first started the food bank and your books were also there, and everyone was very eager for books as well. And it almost brought to mind this, our obscure idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and what we crave, what we're hungry for as people. In Counterpath's journey, have you guys felt like you've been grappling with the idea of hunger and feeding, whether it's hunger for obviously food, but also literature, community, etc.? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's on a very real level, and it's so. I mean, it's so basic. I mean, we literally have people coming to this building and to the food bank who are very, very literally hungry. And we will then, just hand them, even people who are standing in line waiting for their turn to come in and take a grocery bag full of stuff, who need something to be able to continue to stand. So I just think of this one person I just gave like a bag of pretzels to, so that he could continue to stand in the line and not just basically collapse in the parking lot. So that happens and is it's very difficult, and then this kind of feeding of the soul, it also is, I don't know that we have concentrated on that particular thing, but I don't know what Julie would say to this.
Well, I'm
But
thinking of Stephanie, Stephanie, who used to live in the neighborhood. I don't know if she still does, but
yeah.
yeah, okay, I haven't seen her in a while. So Stephanie, who would come to the food bank, and needed the food bank for sure, but also was
Mhm.
really hungry for poetry. Was a person who came every week and would stand in the bookstore for a long, long time looking at all of the titles and always left with at least 10 books, almost always only poetry. And then, she would talk to us about this and how important that was to her. So for sure, people are hungry for books and for poetry. And, I'm also thinking of, I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I'll just throw in, was somebody, there's a number of affordable housing complexes not too far from here, maybe half a mile. And so Stephanie would walk over once or twice a week. And it was just somebody who's, in that kind of poverty space, not able to really afford anything, and would often tell us about her finances when she came over, and we'd kind of like commiserate and strategize and things like that. And this was right when the free bookstore started, I think. And she would just completely just pour over every new title that people had donated. And then get engaged, and then joined the board at that point of the neighborhood association, and would show up here and there and offer input. But there was a nice kind of incredible flow through there to all the different issues we're working with around hunger on different levels. And Stephanie was actually one of the early people to access the food distribution that we're doing too, and take the food back to her apartment.
Yeah, I think a story like that is a great testament to like the rolling effect of Counterpath as a community builder. Ones who you guys have engaged with, they in turn want to also engage with the community, which is really beautiful. Next up, we have a question from Fong.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I was in and out, Edwin, but I will definitely re-listen to it later. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Julie. And of course, thank you, Cole, for your wonderful moderation as always. Yeah, I was just organizing my book collection and pamphlet and magazine whatnot, and came upon these two wonderful. One is Hogarth Press. That's 1913, when Virginia Woolf and her colleague couldn't get their work published. So Leonard Wood decided, well, let's just create our own printing press. That's how it all began. So this is E.M. Forster, what I believe. And then about 35 Penguin books published, Virginia's Woolf almost on own. So I was thinking, trying to find ways to recreate in this mode of thinking, when we just following Madison's inquiry about it, how do you go about being inspired and create publishing and books on your own? So I wonder, in your own personal memory, was there any specific books or specific publishing press that got you excited? I know Cole and I talked about this once, but let's see whether Edwin had something to say, Julie, and then Tim, maybe Norma Cole too. She's here in the audience.
So your question is like, what were some other small presses that inspired us? And
Yeah,
okay,
exactly, Julie.
There were so many. But I'm thinking of Nancy Kuhl and Richard Deming's project. What was it? I don't remember what it was called though. But yeah, yeah,
Oh, what was it called? Ouch.
that's terrible that we can't remember. But they were partners like in life as well as in publishing, and I think we visited with them a year or so before we launched Counterpath, and they had a sort of small press that they were producing work through together. I think that was it, like looking at a couple who were managing to kind of create something together like that that was inspiring to us that we could do something like it. And Nancy, for years and years and years, Nancy Cole, who is a librarian over at the Yale Special Collections, had a postcard project, which like postcard art. I'm sure people have heard of things like this, but she would mail postcards of artists' work, just an image of an artist's work, and that would be it. There'd be no words on it. But she would mail that out to like hundreds of people every week or every other week or once a month or something. You'd get one in the mail and it would just show up. And I think projects like that are just like they're for free, they're just like a commitment, a practice that goes on and on and on, and it doesn't have a lot of explanation built into it. It's not for sale. It's just something someone's doing, and it has a magic to it. Every time you'd get that postcard, you'd stick it on your fridge, and there'd just be this image, this strange image. I think that was also one of the things that got us inspired somehow.
Yeah, and I'll add also that I had been working in publishing for a while before we did this, and I did some work at the New Press in New York before we moved to California, and got, I think, into my blood, I think there. I was only there for about a year, but this kind of resistant, activated version of publishing from those guys. I don't know if people know who they are, but they're still going strong, and they've published some of the most influential books in recent time.
Were you there, Tim, when Andre Shiflin was there?
Yeah, and I used to be there and sit down in their editorial meetings with Diane Wachtel and And he speaking of people who are institutions, was somebody back at Random House, and he had just published The Business of Books. And I can remember him handing me a copy because he went around the entire office and personally gave everyone their own copy. And that is a takedown of corporate publishing, that book. And much of what they were about and are about is that kind of critique. So that, I feel like we didn't sort of carry that forward openly, but there's, with the whole idea of resistant counterpath type activity, it's kind of underlying, and I think we pick up that aspect in our own aesthetic and what we tend to approach.
And definitely in the work you're doing with NP right now, which is its own venture, but
and there's another venture too that critiques the kind of university press system that we have set up. And I don't want to, I thought about this a little bit too. I don't want to leave this event without mentioning the demise of small press distribution very recently, and the kind of implosion that represents within this exact community that we're talking about, of people feeling enabled to publish things and to create communities of their own. What were the causes of that? I mean, I think it was a long time coming, and that the digital turn probably is something that really did it in, because they were so book-based. But there was maybe some other factors too, and we can look at corporate publishing and the ability of that kind of small press community to confront those forces in an ongoing way. There's some people who've kind of picked up the mantle at this point, but of course, blogs came along, and that's what I mean by the digital turn, Facebook, and the fact that you can just publish to your own community in a million different ways at this point. But was there something really lost by that publisher, by that distributor ending in the way they did? I thought it was unnecessarily fast. It was literally within a day, it was gone. And they did such good work and distributed us for like 18 years, and were there as a supportive network.
I just want to add. Oh, sorry. Just wanted to add quickly. There was three that come to mind. Tim, exactly. I think that's a really good discussion about SPD. But I remember being inspired by the journals Chained, by Jenna Spar and Jenna Osman, and XCP by Mark Nowak. Those are really influential to me as far as like hybrid forms in literature form, in book form. And then Adelof's books by Lynn Hergenian. Those were like really important smaller ventures that kind of showed possibility for what poetry, where poetry can go for me.
I was going to shout out Lynn's project as well. And then also, also shout out to Lynn, who we lost this year. And also Ugly Duckling Press is always there as a kind of model and inspiration for making all kinds of projects and books, and being just so consistently dedicated to like the small print run, like the chapbook, but also to to community. I mean, it's been always a really beautiful community builder, at least as far as I've known. Yeah.
I'd love to add
on our board. Yeah.
That's great.
I just wanted to add too, Rosemary Waldrop and Keith Waldrop and Burning Deck Press. They're no longer publishing, but for decades, so supportive of first books, of translation, of a really broad, and always with a sense of bringing people together as a community. So yay, Rosemary and Keith.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, your delicious and very fulfilling responses. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know, Fong, you gave Norma Cole a shout out as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Norma, would you like to be unmuted and answer? Okay. Go ahead. Should be able to unmute yourself, Norma.
Hi. It's so I can't even say how wonderful it is to hear about Counterpath. I've known it for ages, but didn't really get the sense of the huge work that you do. Anyway, but thinking about my first sense of small press in Toronto when I was a teenager, I saw one book. It was Robert Duncan. It was a city lights book, one of those pocket poets press, and I thought it's a pocket, but you can put it in your pocket. That's amazing. It's really amazing, and then coming to San Francisco and getting to know the people who are there now, and you feel like, oh, I'm part of this community, and you put everything into that community, and so that's one of the things. But also, I was thinking about Kripskaya Press, Jocelyn Seidenberg, and how once we were having a garage sale, and she came up to me and said, maybe you would want to be one of the editors. She had the thing where you could be an editor and for 2 years, and then you switch off. And I just said, yes, I would love to. And she was surprised because I had never, she didn't see that I had shown any interest in that kind of thing. But the being an editor at Kripskaya meant you went from start to finish. You were involved in choosing the books, and then you each person had one of the poets, and you would follow that book through all the iterations until it evolved into a book, actually. And thinking about what you were saying, Tim, about small press distribution, how it went away. I know that Jocelyn is, and I'm sure many others are thinking about this. It made her realize that there are so many ways to show the work, and she's just putting her thoughts to that, not just asterism or just one way of distributing work. But I love the way that you have the food bank and performance and books and everything all in your place, in your local place. It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Cole, for having this. And thanks you, Fong.
Thank you so much, Norma. I'm so glad that you got to an opportunity to share with us as well.
Yeah, and there's an aspect of what happened to SPD that's kind of good, because maybe so many people really needed to kind of rethink what they were doing. That really threw everybody into the pool, so to speak. And it's great to hear you mentioned Krupskaya and have Atilos mentioned, and those guys were active when we lived in the Bay Area. We actually started Counterpath when we lived there in Berkeley. So we were going to readings with these folks and getting to know Lynn, and who ended up on our board and everything. So that community, we actually signed our first books and then left town and came to Colorado right then. So our first books are actually Andrew Joran, primarily, and then Lady Brown, who we knew in California. They were really kind of Bay Area books, and so it's that connection to that community is really kind of in our blood also. But yeah,
I know we're running right down to the wire here, but you mentioned NP, and I wondered if you want to talk a little bit about that before we segue into closing reading.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Yeah, that is a kind of outgrowth, I think, of some of these concerns, and it's something that's very much kind of project-based, but it's very specifically oriented to looking at scholarly publishing and how that sort of operates. So kind of wanting to look at kind of contemporary knowledge production, so to speak, and look at the kind of, you could say, maybe corporate influence right at that kind of key moment of activity around books, whether it's a book for tenure or for some other use that's flowing through the university press system, and how that really operates. So everything that's kind of connected to that, and it really is within the sort of field of critical university studies in a lot of ways. That's what I mentioned, because it's that's a kind of recognizable, discernible kind of movement out there, where there are a number of publications that really want to unpack this in very, very intense institutional presence within American and global culture that's often really not addressed, that works its way all the way down to how we view the book, or how we view what we accept as actual knowledge, and all the way to the fact that we want to, and we all sort of buy into the idea that we need to kind of bring our children into this kind of financialization of lifelong student debt. The list just goes on and on of how we can, and probably, maybe need to look at that particular dynamic. So this press, which is kind of under the umbrella of Counterpath, is publishing books that talk about all these things, and they don't necessarily have to be scholarly books, but they kind of work their way around into more artistic endeavors and things like that. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all for just such a great conversation, and maybe we'll end with hearing from Tim, hearing your own work.
Great, thank you so much for this whole event. So amazed that you're doing this. This I want to is from a project that's kind of tentatively titled Prelims, which is kind of looking at an idea that kind of looks at Richie Havens and in Live at the Cellar Door, this particular work and kind of citational practice that is happening there. So here goes. I'm going to agree far too much to assess for now, given the earlier iteration. What's that look like? I can't tell if you're having feelings. We were all putting the lines together. I wish I didn't have to do that. Took a while for the pills to saturate, during which time we clung to the raft, or no, that is, we took a swig of the river. I guess you could also say son crying from the audience near stages uncontrollable, while the nation soaked itself in reassurance of the penultimate nature of this Wednesday night, wherein I'm clearly on the side of survivability, which has new terms both as a result of pandemic and ultramodern warfare. We were amused, even so, clamoring amid our joy for alternatives. And what joy it was. You could say there was a minute at the convention where the rhetoric made perfect sense, but this isn't that time frame. We had a handful of books beside us. It was better that way. I do it for their sake, since if there's one thing you can do, it's to provide a platform, a moment for a real statement. That's this moment where I actually listen to you, where I actually put it together insofar as I'm not asking for anything else. I want to keep showing how we all come together and make a community of materials, and how in the offing is a commodity that's analyzed until it disappears, losing everything it used to have, but of course, in the process, gaining a new power in the periphery, basically sound on top of sound, tested for and baked into prescription. Look how well you've done. I feel like I'm being forced to settle. I feel like I'm actually doing whatever else it is that auto-generates and channels repeated oil spills and trips to the moonlit waterway. Given the text being read, if you stay, did you stay? Given the formation being talked about, didn't study hard enough, got pissed off. What? Went like never before into the nitty gritty. That's right. One could only fuck with the definition. One could only be just about right in the fact, or you know the fact, or I think standing there, I wanted to return as quick as I could. I loved it there. No, but I love that book because it's not only close to the setup I'm reaching for, but speaks to a connection among all things. Finally, the somewhat larger project was there too as a maker of substantive claims that draw in paying customers, so that then the marker turns out to be fully in tune with a host of other affiliations that forever you assumed were random. How is it? Keep trying to talk every day and the city keeps evolving, putting in already defunct filling stations and running its own campaign. A gagged media strategy is what you didn't want to be good at, the marriage of waiting around and padding your resume. Imminent cancer, stage 4 in the grade 3 colony, but my word, I hardly knew ye after more Thanksgivings than not. You've got to get to the checkpoint in as much as every move constitutes its own encampment. But what is the mayor up to this week? I'm tasked with being upended, which is the status quo for revolutionaries, but I really don't know the sound we were busy absorbing, which is eventually impossible to withstand. So look forward to that, paragraphing your own loss of consciousness in the alleys of the nouveau machine. I'm not tasked with a summary. The poem was most certainly a series of instances you were not intended to comprehend. I'm going to agree far too much to assess for now, given the earlier iteration. What's that look like? I can't tell if you're having feelings. We were all putting the lines together. I wish I didn't have to do that. Took a while for the pills to saturate, during which time we clung to the raft, or no, that is, we took a swig of the river. I guess you could also say son crying from the audience near stages uncontrollable, while the nation soaked itself in the reassurance of the penultimate nature of this Wednesday night, wherein I'm clearly on the side of survivability, which has new terms both as a result of pandemic and ultramodern warfare. We were amused, even so, clamoring amid our joy for alternatives. And what joy it was. You could say there was a minute at the convention where the rhetoric made perfect sense, but this isn't that time frame. We had a handful of books beside us. It was better that way. I do it for their sake, since if there's one thing you can do, it's provide a platform, a moment for a real statement. That's this moment where I actually listen to you, where I actually put it together insofar as I'm not asking for anything else. I want to keep showing how we all come together and make a community of materials. And now in the offing is a commodity that's analyzed until it disappears, losing everything it used to have. But of course, in the process, gaining a new power in the periphery, basically sound on top of sound, tested for and baked into prescription. Look how well you've done. I feel like I'm being forced to settle. I feel like I'm actually doing whatever else it is that auto-generates and channels repeated oil spills and return trips to the moonlit waterway. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim.
And thank you, Edwin and Julie and Tim and Madison and everybody there at the Rail. And as always, thank you so much, Fong, for creating the space for us to do this.
Thank you, Julie, Tim, Edwin, and Cole. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Antonio Muntadas, Marshall Reese, and Eleanor Hartney discussing their work, Political Advertisement. You can now turn on your microphone and say goodbye to our guest as you leave. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great
Thank
presentation.
you
Yes,
so much.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Tim. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you,
Thank you, Edwin.
Tim.
It's
Julie,
great.
Emily.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tim.
Congrats,
Thank you,
Edwin.
good voices.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Get the
Thank you
book.
so much.
Great
Have a good one,
conversation
y'all.
today.
Congratulations. Thank you,
Thank
Cole.
you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's get the book. Let's buy the